Okay. And so this part is making a very, very simple tile map. And a tile map is kind of like the background of a game, especially like a top-down RPG style game. But you might also use it, you can also use it for platformers in a platformer style game. So I'll show how to do both using a very simple tile map. And then on Thursday, we're going to do a more complicated tile map uh, that can also be used for both cases. So this part is this tile sets and platforms things. There's like a couple links here to creating tile sets that go in more depth. And this is also designing tile maps, which what I want to open is this. Oh wait, that's the tutorial. I want to open just the page tile sets. No, okay, never mind. Let's just go to Godot tile map. So Godot has a lot of examples of how to use all of their different components. And what we're creating first is like kind of a tile map. This is like a more complicated one than what we're doing, but we'll do something similar to this on Thursday. But Godot, I should show these more often. Godot has really good documentation about how to use all the different components. So this is like a good tutorial, and they have a lot of other tutorials about how to create stuff in Godot. So um, just to keep that in mind. So we're going to have to make some art again. And basically what I'm going to do is create tiles for a few different types of terrain to add into my scene. So I'm going to go to Piskel again, and I'm just going to put these all into one big sprite sheet. So I'm just going to make one frame for each different type of tile. And so you can play around with this. The size for these tiles is pretty important here. I'm going to stick with 32 by 32, but depending on what you want your game to look like, you might want a smaller tile so you can add more detail, or you might want a larger tile so you don't have to deal with the detail quite as much. I'm going to stick with 32 by 32 and just get started. So let's save this. I'm going to call this my tile set simple. And we'll do a auto tile set on Thursday. Actually, let's call this, I want this to be in my scenery. So let's call this scenery tile set simple. And we'll save that. Okay. So I'm really just like going to create big blocks of color here. It's going to be a little bit simplistic. But so my first type of terrain is going to be like just like some dirt. So I'll get like a brown color, something like that. I'm just going to fill in this whole thing. And then I'll use the light and darken tool just to put like a few blocks of detail. Actually, let's make this even bigger. Let's do like, oops. Let's do the middle one. Let's do like that. So I'm just like literally putting a few dots as like detail. Super, super simple. So that's going to be like my dirt tile. Okay, so then we want like a grass tile. I'm going to do almost the exact same thing, but I'm going to make it green. And let's turn the animation off. Okay, so same thing, just like grass, but I'm putting some dots in here just to make it not just a block of color. And then I'm going to have a water section to make some like ocean or something. So I'll just take blue, fill it in, add in some dots, literally the same thing, but with a different color. I'm just keeping this simple. You can add as much or as little detail in these things as you want. But for the sake of the tutorial and time, I'm just going to do something really, really simple. So I'm going to save that. So there's my tile set. I only have 3 types of tiles. So I'm just going to have 3 types of terrain, and I'm going to start to build out my scene that way. So I'm going to export this. So I'm going to leave everything the same and just click download. And it's already set on my game, so I'm just going to click save. Okay, almost ready to go. So I've got my art now. I'm going to leave here. And I'm going to go back to Godot, and now setting up a tile set is more complicated. So I'm going to make a new node for this. So I'm back in Godot. I'm going to make a new node for my tile map. So I'm going to add a child node. And in here, I'm just going to search for a tile map. So there we see a tile map. And I'm going to hit enter. And so I'll put my tile map. It's going to be below my scenery by default. So I'm just going to put it up there. So it's the first thing in my hierarchy. And now I'm going to create my tile map. So this part is a little bit complicated, but it should be, should make sense hopefully. So to start with my tile map, I just click on the tile map and I have to create a tile set. So in the inspector under tile map, sort of similar to the animated sprite, there's a tile set field, which is currently empty. And if I click on that and click new tile set, it'll create a tile set for me. And I can click on this and go to the tile set editor. So like the animated sprite editor, it opens a little window down here. I'll probably want to make this a little bit bigger to make it easier to edit. One thing I want to make sure to do first, this is where you can get into trouble a little bit, is you want to make sure that your dimensions for your tile map match your art. So the place where I can see this is this cell size here. So under tile map where it says cell, when I open this up, notice that this is 64 by 64, which is not what I want because my art is 32 by 32. So I'm going to change this to 32 by 32. You can always change it later, but this is going to stop it from looking crazy. So that's all I have to do there. And I'm also going to go ahead in my scene and set it to be 32 by 32 so it'll line up. So I'm going to go to this little menu in the top of my scene toolbar and go to configure snap and change this to 32 by 32. And we'll see the grid of the scene is going to get a little bit bigger. And now what we should see, hopefully, is that this little orange box, which is hard to see on the projector, but if you look at it, if you're in Godot, you should be able to see it. The little orange box should match the grid of the scene. Okay, so once I have that set up, I can go to my tile set, and I'm going to increase the size of this window a bit. And I'm going to add a texture in here to divide up into different tiles. So I'm going to click the plus button at the bottom, go to sprites, and add in my simple tile set. And so the tile set editor honestly is a little tricky to use, but basically we just want to separate each one of these tiles so that we can draw with them. And then we can draw a scene, which will be a lot faster than placing the tiles one by one. So I'm going to increase over here, I'm going to zoom in. And the thing with this is that it's kind of confusing when you're adding the tiles. So what I have to do first is click new single tile. And then I can turn on this region snapping, and you'll see this like blue grid around the tiles. And if it's set up correctly, it should align. So you should see the grid matches your artwork. If it doesn't align, you can change this. So you can click on the region. How do I do this? Okay, so I have to make a tile first, and then you can check the snap options. And so the step here is 32 by 32. That's what we want. If it was something else like 64 by 64, then you would see that the lines don't match up. The grid isn't right. If it was like 16 by 16, now there's like too many lines. You want to make sure that the blue lines match your art. I'm going to go back to 32 by 32. Now it's very easy. I've created a tile here. I'm going to click new single tile and choose my first cell, click new single tile and choose my last cell. So now I actually have all three of my cells. And if I look at this selected tile, I can give it a name. So the way I get back and forth between my tiles is by clicking on these arrows. That's kind of the tricky part because what happens is if I add another single tile, they'll just be like layered on top of each other, and that's not really what I want. But I can also click on the different tiles that already exist to edit them. So this interface can be kind of tricky, but you'll get used to it eventually. So I want to name these tiles to make it a little bit easier to find them later. So this is my dirt tile. So I'm just going to name this dirt. And then this is my grass tile. So I'm going to name it grass. And then down here is my water tile. And that's going to make it a lot easier for me to design with this tile map. So yeah, that's basically all we need to do to set this one up for now. We're going to do something a little more trickier on Thursday, but for now, this is what all we need. So I'm gonna to get out of this window, I'm just gonna go click on my tile map again, and it'll bring me back to my scene. Notice now that if I click on my if I click on the player and then go back to the tile map, notice this new menu comes up here. We can make this a little bigger if we want. And so now we have our different tiles that we labeled. Okay, so you don't have to label them, they'll still be there, but you can see that it helps to label them because now we know which one is which. We can see which one is which easily, but if we had a lot of them, you know, there would be different ones. We can also search for tiles. So if I can't see the grass because I have like tons and tons of different textures, I can search in there. So let's like give our character like a little dirt path. So the cool thing about the tile map is now I can just draw with these different tiles. So I'm just going to draw across here, and we covered up our character. So let's make sure our tile set is beneath everything. I'm going to put the z index down to -1. So actually, I don't think I've talked about that before, but every one of your nodes has a z index, and that changes the sorting of the nodes. So if I click on tile map and I want to make sure it's below my other tiles, I just click on the tile map and go to node 2D, go to z index, and then I can change the z index here. So if I go down, it'll go below stuff. If I go up, it'll go above stuff. So I'll change the z index to -1, and now I can just draw like a little path for my player to walk on. And I can just, I can draw on any of these tiles. If I want to delete something, I just use the right mouse button. And then I can also draw big swatches. So if I hold shift, you can see I can make like a line. And if I hold shift and control, I can make like a big square. And same thing with erasing. If I hold shift and control, I can erase a whole big section. So this is a really fast way to just draw the background of my level. So I could have some dirt here. I could switch to grass and surround my dirt with some grass. And you can choose different terrains. I'm just kind of doing these like simple defaults. So I have like a dirt path in the middle of this like grass field. And I probably would have wanted to go with smaller tiles because my art is so small, but that's okay for this example. And then if I want this to be an island, I can just surround it with water. So let's just do big chunks of water here. And so you can see how this is going to save me a ton of time with creating my levels by using tiles instead of having to place individual components. So now let's take a look at our scene. Okay, so now we can walk around and we can see all our tiles. So one last little bit, notice that I can just like walk into the water. So if your terrain is walkable, that doesn't really matter, but you might want to make your terrain not walkable, right? So we'll go over this more when we talk about physics, but what we can do really quickly is just add a collision here. So I'll go back to my tile map and let's get rid of the output. So I'll click on my tile map, go back to my tile set and click on my scenery. And so if I want something to be not walkable, I can click on the tile that I want. So I'm going to click on this water tile, see that the name is water here. It's kind of hard to tell which one is selected because it's just barely highlighted. So we can see that the name is water. And so there's different ways to do this. You can see there's a navigation section. That's for like NPCs. So we're not going to set that up yet. But what I can do is add a collision here. So a collision is going to block other colliders. And remember, when we created our player, we added this collision shape. And so this blue collision shape will knock into the collider that we add here. So I'm going to choose my tile, click on this collision section, and then click this box. And so I want a box. I'm just going to put it in here. It fits perfectly, so I don't need to edit it. There are little red dots, and it's on snap mode now, so I can't really edit them. But if I wanted to, I could like move these around and change the collision. But I don't really want to because it's already a box, and that's what I want it to be. So I'm just going to leave that there and hit save. And now I will click on the tile map again. And now when I run this scene, my player should not be able to walk in the water. So when I get to the water, the player can't move anymore. And so I can create these boundaries for my game world. Okay, so that's pretty much it. We're going to do a more interesting tile map with like edges and stuff on Thursday, but this should be good enough to get us started. So I'll do some documentation real quick. So I'm going to run the scene and I'll just show a couple different parts. So I'll show the player on his little dirt path. So let's open up the game bar, hitting Windows G, and I'm going to take a snapshot here. And then let's show, we can just show the water here. Okay, so that's good enough to show the progress. And so we'll post these, we'll add some more stuff on Thursday and we'll post this together. So I won't do the Open Lab right now. I'll do that with our second part on Thursday. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording.